Current environmental issues from the sociological perspective. Over the course of this semester, I analyzed several articles from the New York Times concerning environmental issues. These effects have impacts all over the world and range from lack of resources for some to serious health complications for others. In much of the world, an underlying issue that leads to environmental degradation is the social stratification system seen in many cultures. I'll go into further detail later in the presentation. Four of the articles I analyzed did an exceptional job of really bringing the necessity of environmental change to light. Two of these four articles gave examples of possible incentives pushing the change to environmentally friendly activities, while the final two gave important information as to why we must not hesitate to implement less destructive methods. The second article I analyzed, titled "China to Reward Cities and Regions Making Progress on Air Pollution," explained a new incentive from the Chinese government available for regions which dramatically cut down on their air pollution. Ways of cutting down pollution include using higher quality gasoline, lowering energy use in construction, and controlling the coal consumption nationwide. These regions will be paid nearly $2 billion, which proves the desperation of the country's government to cut down on emissions. A similar article, titled "Caribbean Islands Agree to Swap Diesel Power for Renewable Sources," laid out a plan for several Caribbean islands such as St. Lucia, Turks and Caicos, and the British Virgin Islands to replace current generators with renewable resources such as solar and wind power. Doing so would greatly decrease the cost of living in these islands. Two other articles explain reports issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a group created by the United Nations whose function is to discuss climate science and environmental concerns which are leading to climate change. In many places in the world, environmental degradation is becoming more noticeable. Polar ice caps are melting, which will lead to a sea level rise. Water supplies are actually drying up in some parts of the world, and many species are migrating or dying off due to lack of resources or migration of resources. Our resources are becoming scarce as well. As we studied in class, when resources are in short supply, violence can certainly start making its mark on the people of the area. The IPCC says that without significant change, catastrophic disasters like the ones I mentioned before will take place. In order to make a huge change, we will need more advanced technology, which we currently do not have and do not entirely know how to create. This is one of few cases in which technology is not advancing fast enough, unlike the common progression of technology in which we as consumers cannot keep up with its advancements. One of the main patterns I noticed over the course of the semester was a huge emphasis on social stratification, especially on the factor of wealth versus poor. For example, in the last article I analyzed, the IPCC report stated that some of the world's wealthy would become even richer due to the development and production of new technologies. But 5% or more of the world's poor would see even more financial loss due to the environmental degradation often pushed by wealthier countries. This can be explained with the dependency theory and Wallerstein's world systems model theory, in which goods from periphery nations, such as those that are not as wealthy, are taken from these places and sent to core nations for production, often wealthier nations like the United States or those in Europe. While the periphery nations cannot afford the environmental degradation or to have their resources taken, they also cannot afford to deny any money, however small, they could make from the trade, making them almost entirely dependent on these core nations. Without providing for poorer countries or implementing sustainable methods or switching to renewable resources, the divide between wealthy nations and poor nations will just continue to grow. The catch-22 is that, despite the industrial growth and advancement of these wealthy nations, environmental concerns affect the entire world, not just the poorer countries. This makes the topic of environmental issues one of grave importance and one that should no longer be passed over.
Created using Powtoon.